I am back with Faye Delacour, who just read a sample of A Lady's Guide to London. And like I said, that was really fun because we get the like kind of funny reaction to finding out that she's a woman, but also a really tender insight into Lyman's psyche as he's kind of dealing with this woman who is not what he expected. Something that I wonder if it becomes a theme in the book is money versus passion because he's very focused on
hmm
money and she clearly is coming from a place of passion. Can
hmm
you talk about does that become a theme? How did you think about that?
Yeah, no, definitely. I picture them as like Della is a very lively character. Like she has a lot of life. She kind of goes where her emotions take her, where her passions take her. And so she's sort of like living life to the fullest, although sometimes a little bit like skirting the boundary with recklessness because she's had a pretty privileged life where she comes from like a well-to-do family. And so she doesn't have to worry much about anything in life. And then Lyman, on the other hand, used to sort of experience that when he was in his youth. But as you find out over the course of the book, he gambled away his fortune and has lost everything and is now in disgrace. And his wife has left him many years ago. So that was like a little bit of a slightly controversial thing in a historical to have like a hero who's separated from his wife and like in the process of divorcing. But that's his situation. So he's like lost everything and he has no one to blame but himself. And so, as a sort of like, self-punishment or out of necessity, also, he's lived a very austere, like lifeless, joyless kind of existence since then, trying to do whatever he can to like earn back as much money as he's able to, even if he'll never recover his former fortune, to be able to pay some of that towards his ex-wife to try and like make up for all the damage that he's caused and to be able to support her and to pay back some of his debts. So basically, he does not really anything in life except to work and to worry about where he's going to get his next source of income from. And when he encounters Della and she's trying to persuade him to put the club in his book, initially he's very resistant and he wants nothing to do with her, but they end up sort of being forced to work together because she proposes to his publisher that she's going to write her own guide for women, for the women of London, to local attractions, since he won't put her club in his guide. And so then he ends up collaborating with her on this project for money. But as they spend time together, he sort of sees like there's a tension there of him wanting to do what he feels is the only thing he deserves to sort of, work hard and pay back his debts versus like missing that sense of, life and enjoyment and passion that she represents.
Yeah, I love that. I just read a book on, it's called Black Sheep, and it's about like the heirs of aristocracy who gambled away their fortunes and everything. And there were actually, I was surprised reading it, how many of them had public separations and even divorces
Mhm.
from their spouses. So,
Yeah, I think a lot of people suffer from the misconception that it didn't happen, but like throughout time, people have always, made mistakes, rash decisions about who they married, and then been like, "Whoops, I want to get out of this." That's not a new phenomenon, whether it's socially acceptable or not. That can change with the times. But there have always been some people who sought to do that, and people who are on the lower end of the economic spectrum couldn't afford to get like a real divorce, but would often just live separately and sometimes even remarry and commit bigamy without ever having done anything to resolve their former union. And nobody really, it might cause a scandal, but nobody cared that much about it if you didn't have an inheritance to protect, right? When I say nobody cared, I mean, I guess, some people cared, like the busybodies of the neighborhood care, but it wasn't a huge deal if you didn't have heirs to fight over something. With the aristocracy, it was more of a huge deal because if you're dividing up your income, people have a title, people have land that they want to claim. So it was a lot harder to get a divorce. And the main social evil of divorce was, kind of sort of focused on inheritance and what would this mean for like the family line. But people did do it sometimes. It just took a private act of parliament at that time period. So it was difficult. But like in researching this, I would go through old newspapers and find examples because, they would publish like summaries of court cases and things like that. And you could see that, there were quite a few examples. It provoked a big scandal. People didn't like it, but it did happen.